You ever see something that just breaks your brain a little bit? Something that looks so much like magic you can't help but wonder how it works? Well, today we're going on a wild 2-year journey to create one of those exact objects. And it all started with just a single moment of, whoa, what was that? It all kicked off with a video. The creator, now Red, was watching as someone dropped a small magnet onto this black ceramic disc. But it didn't hit. It just stopped, hovering in midair. He said it was like anti-gravity magic. You could nudge it, spin it around, and it would just float there, perfectly stable. And that image just got stuck in his head.
You know that feeling, right? You see something amazing, and that little voice in your head goes, could I make that? And that's exactly where this whole quest began. It's one thing to be amazed by a video, but it's a whole other thing to try and replicate that magic in your own lab.
Now, that initial spark was powerful, for sure. But let's be real, it was followed by about 1.5 years of just thinking about it. Procrastinating, really. The whole thing seemed so impossibly complicated. But that curiosity, that little itch, it just wouldn't go away. And eventually, it won. The quest was on.
Okay, so first things first. Not all superconductors are the same. A lot of them need to be cooled to temperatures near absolute zero. We're talking like liquid helium temperatures, which is a complete non-starter for a home lab. But the one in the video was different. It's called a YBCO superconductor, and it works at a much warmer, negative 181 degrees Celsius. And that temperature, that you can actually hit with liquid nitrogen. So, boom, we have our target. So you've got your target. Now you need a recipe, a guide to follow. And if you've ever tried to learn something online, you know the real challenge isn't finding information, it's finding information you can actually trust. This turned out to be the first big roadblock. He found this one procedure online that seemed perfect, super detailed, lots of steps. But when he sat down to actually run the numbers and calculate the chemical amounts, nothing added up. The ratios were just plain wrong. A small typo is one thing, but this was so off it made him question the entire guide. He just couldn't trust it. So it was back to square one, searching for a new recipe. After finally tracking down a reliable, if a little less detailed procedure, it was time to get his hands dirty. And this is where things get really interesting. We're talking purifying chemicals, mixing everything up just right, and dealing with some very real dangers, including a near disaster with a very expensive, very crucial piece of equipment. So the basic recipe starts pretty simply. You dissolve the nitrates of the 3 key metals, yttrium, barium, and copper, in water. Then you add some citric acid and neutralize the whole thing with ammonia. The last step is to gently evaporate all the water away, which leaves behind this kind of gunky solid and sets the stage for some real chemical fireworks. And here's the payoff. You heat that gunk up, and it ignites in this really cool reaction called a citrate pyrolysis. It's a slow, self-fueling burn that just kind of crawls through the mixture, making it puff up and expand. And when it's all done, you're left with this incredibly fine, fluffy jet black powder. This is the raw material for our superconductor. Now, to turn that powder into the final product, you need a special piece of gear, a tube furnace. It gets super hot, and you can pump pure oxygen into it. He found a good deal on one, but then he gets a call from the shipping company, and the news is not great. The crate it was shipped in had, well, basically disintegrated. Somehow, the furnace itself looked okay, just a little scuffed up. A huge relief, right? So he gets it back to the lab, plugs it in, and flips the switch. And that's when the real problem showed up. The furnace turned on for just a second, and then poof, it died. A nasty burning smell starts to fill the room. Then he sees it, smoke pouring out of the back. It looked like the shipping damage was way worse than he thought. He just fried a $2,000 furnace. But here's the hilarious twist. It had nothing to do with shipping. It was a classic, painful, and very human mistake. He'd forgotten he bought the 120-volt version of the furnace. And based on the Chinese plug, he just went ahead and plugged it right into a 220-volt outlet. Yep, he cooked his own furnace. So, after a few very stressful days of playing electronic surgeon, he actually managed to fix the furnace, which is amazing. But now, the real work could begin. Taking that fluffy black powder and turning it into a working superconductor. This part of the journey was going to be long and filled with a lot of failure. Yeah, this is not a quick process. You put the powder in the furnace and you have to pump a steady stream of pure oxygen over it. You heat it up to 920 Celsius, let it bake for 10 hours, and then This is the crazy part. You have to cool it down incredibly slowly over another 18 hours. The whole cycle takes more than a full day.
So after that first 28-hour cook, he pulls out the sample, he cools it down with liquid nitrogen, holds his breath, and drops the magnet on it. And nothing. Total failure. It just sat there. The powder was still way too light and fluffy, it hadn't sintered together, and it clearly hadn't soaked up enough oxygen. So what do? You start over. He ground that failed powder back up, but this time he used a hydraulic press to squish it into a super dense little pellet. Then he ran it through that entire 28-hour furnace cycle all over again. And this time it worked. The magnet floated. That first moment of actual success.
Feeling amazing, he decided it was time to scale up. He took the rest of his black powder, made 5 brand new, perfect-looking pellets, and ran them through the exact same successful process. But when he tested them, nothing. Not a single one of them worked. It was a massive step backward. The only thing that made sense was that the bigger batch just wasn't getting enough oxygen deep inside the pellets.
This crushing failure forced him to take a step back. Clearly, just repeating the steps wasn't enough. He needed to really, truly understand the physics of what was supposed to be happening. What was the science behind the magic that made that magnet float? Because it wasn't magic. It was a combination of 2 really cool scientific principles.
And the solution, in the end, was just pure brute force persistence. He took all 5 failed pellets, crushed them back into a fine powder, pressed them into new pellets, and put them through the 24-hour furnace cycle. Not once, but 2 more times, just to absolutely saturate them with oxygen. And after all that, he tested them one last time. And they worked. All 5 of them worked perfectly. So what is actually going on here? The first piece of the puzzle is something called diamagnetism, or the Messner effect. When the YBCO gets cold enough to become a superconductor, it basically turns into a perfect magnetic shield. It actively repels and expels any magnetic field, and that repulsion is so strong it's what physically pushes the magnet up into the air and makes it float.
But here's the really cool part. If it was only repulsion, the magnet would just shoot off to the side. The reason it's so stable is because of something called flux pinning. Tiny little defects and impurities in the superconductor's crystal structure act like little traps. They let some of the magnetic field lines get pinned inside the material, and these act like invisible tethers, locking the magnet in space so it can spin and move around without ever falling off.
And so after 2 years of research, fried electronics, failed attempts, and just grinding it out, the magic was finally made. It's an incredible story of perseverance, and it just shows what you can do when you get obsessed with a problem. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What's your 2-year quest?